In February, we were all shook as war broke out between Ukraine and Russia. But now, at least here in Singapore, we've all kind of moved on with our lives. But the war is still very much going on. Just look at these videos.
The rail bridge connecting occupied Crimea to Russia is on fire. The road bridge next to it has collapsed.
Breaking news out of Ukraine. The mayor of Kyiv has confirmed there have been several large explosions in the centre of the city.
I'm not an IR or war expert, so I don't really understand what all this amounts to. How does war work and how does it end? I definitely need some help on this.
So you ask what happens usually in a war? Well, both sides make maximalist demands and they fight until they feel the need to compromise.
I guess you can think of it like an argument on the playground. A kid, unprovoked, kicks sand into your eyes, so you want to defend yourself. You end up both kicking sand in each other's eyes until both your eyes are red and you're crying and it hurts. Then finally the other kid realizes, hey, this is dumb. Our eyes are filled with sand. Maybe you should stop fighting. But currently in the war, it seems like neither Russia nor Ukraine is calling a truce. Okay, if that's the case, then who's winning? Who's in the lead? Trick question. It's a war, no one wins. But what we can see is how much of the objectives each party has accomplished. According to Dr. Kliem, these are their goals. For the Ukrainian government, it's a bit more straightforward. They're trying to defend Ukrainian territory as they see is rightfully theirs. For the Kremlin, well, it's changed a bit over time. They've never said it precisely, but according to Dr. Kliem, their original objective was probably to take over all of Ukraine and install a puppet government there. But what the Kremlin probably did not expect is that the Ukrainians would put up such a strong fight.
So they probably want to control all of the Donbas region. And then if you look at, again, this is speculation on my part, right? So it's going kind of east and then south, almost make Ukraine a landlocked country by cutting off access to the sea. What side is achieving their objective? Then I must say, nobody really, right? I mean, Ukraine has lost territory. The Russians have not achieved their maximum objectives either.
Based on these objectives, neither party is making significant progress though.
It appears that we have reached some sort of stalemate now in the conflict, right? So Russia is holding something about 25% of Ukrainian territory, and that's mostly in the south and the east of Ukraine.
But Dr. Kliem isn't optimistic that the war will end anytime soon. And furthermore, the war has become more complicated.
This is really a proxy war. What I mean by this is Ukrainian soldiers are fighting bravely on Ukraine's side, but they're fighting with NATO weapons and NATO military intelligence. A broader context to this, of course, Ukraine needs to be supported in this defense of their territory, but Ukraine is heavily dependent on these weapons deliveries and intelligence support from NATO countries. I think proxy wars are never really proxy wars from the very beginning. I think the nature of a proxy war is that at least one of the big fighting parties is not actually doing the fighting. But at some point, the big parties realize they have a stake in this and then they start supporting local forces, right? And then it becomes a proxy war. If you think back to, let's say, the end of February, early March time, people would say, oh, Ukraine is going to fall. Ukraine is going to fall within a week. And then it turns out that the Ukrainians actually have a really strong will to fight this war and are not going to give up their country so easily. And NATO thinking was, okay, look, they're actually willing to fight. So if we support them with what is necessary, then we may not have to concede this to Russia. And this is how it became a proxy war.
Dr. Kliem adds that Russia still has a lot of resources and is willing to pump a lot more into the war. How does a war end then? Well, either one side surrenders or there's a compromise. And in Dr. Kliem's opinion, the latter is the most optimistic outcome at this point in time.
You could, for example, think of the Korean War where things have changed very quickly when the Americans got a bit too close for Mao's liking to the Chinese border, and then the PRC saw it necessary to intervene. And then they have reached some sort of settlement, which is not an end to the war, but has been frozen, and it has worked for almost 70 years now. So what we are seeing is that compromise is possible and freezing conflict is possible. It's not perfect and it's unstable, but at least it stops the killing.
After Putin announced the illegal annexation of 4 Russian-occupied regions of Ukraine, he said on September 30th that he's open to negotiate with Ukraine, a claim that he's made several times before while carrying on with the invasion. Zelensky, on the other hand, has applied for accelerated ascension into NATO and said Ukraine will only negotiate with a new Russian president, not Putin. Will this actually lead to an agreement? Given that both parties are still making such demands, probably not.
Both sides are still making maximum demands, right? So they're really maximalist in a sense. Russia is not compromising at all, and Ukraine now, emboldened by so much Western support, military and financial support, now want to, understandably, make up for the lost territory that Russia clearly stole from Ukraine.
How do you think the war has impacted the world so far, particularly Singapore?
I think the most obvious for people is that it has caused prices to hike quite significantly for all sorts of items, right? Much more importantly, in my opinion, is it has impacted us in a way that we think about this might is right principle a lot more. We see that a country can just do to their neighbor whatever they want. Do they get away with it? We hope not, because we don't want this to set a precedent, right? I mean, we have our own very large neighbor here in this neighborhood, and I'm not saying we need to compare them or they have the same intention. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that other countries in the region feel that this kind of behavior must not be tolerated. And we feel scared, I guess, in a way, that big neighbors can do at the end of the day whatever they want. They can just take territory if they feel the need to take that territory. And that's something we do not want to see entrenched.